Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the BG Independent Podcast. I'm your host, Dustin Galish. On this episode, we're going to focus on the upcoming 30th Annual Black Swamp Arts Festival. I sat down with David Dupont, who actually moved here the same year that the festival started, and has been covering the event personally and professionally in many manners for truly 30 years. And so we sat down, talked about the history of the festival, and then we actually reviewed all of the music performers from the festival this year, and just talk about the visual arts as well. So sit back, relax, and enjoy this episode of the BG Independent Podcast. Thank you so much, David, for being here today. This is a different approach to our podcast. We're going to do the Black Swamp Arts Festival 30th anniversary preview show, I guess we'll say. It's that. It's sort of fun. My background a little bit, just I've played the festival, been living here since the early 2000s, and so I've caught a bunch of different acts and seen a bunch of different art over the years, but I've heard a lot of stories and ideas about how it came to be. But it's exciting. It's been 30 years now, which is sort of, we were discussing earlier, is how long you've actually been here now, David.
Yeah, we went to the first festival. We had just arrived, and friends of ours said, "Oh, they're putting on this festival." And I remember walking down Main Street, and the booths were like there were like 4 or 5 or something. There was more than that, but it was very few booths on Main Street. It was, as we remember, had some weather problems. I'm thinking we maybe went down on Sunday. Maybe we went down Saturday and Sunday, but I know Saturday nights when the skies opened and the show, Leon Redbone, who was then proceeded to come back a number of times until his death, was moved inside to St. Mark's, and we were intending to go to that show, but when it started pouring and I was looking at the Blade, I have to say I saw that Ernie Krivda, the great saxophonist from Cleveland, who interestingly was the headliner the next year at the Black Swamp Arts Festival, was playing at Rusty's in Tidrow in Toledo, and those were sort of, I wanted to see Ernie Krivda live, and I wanted to go to Rusty's because it was a notable club. So we went there. So we did not see the first show, the first music show, but we did attend that first festival and attended every one until a couple years ago when my nephew got married on that weekend. And so we went to his wedding in Rhode Island and missed the show for the first time. But
there's probably some disappointment there. I'm sure you're great to be at a wedding, but it is being in this town long enough now, this festival does seem like it really is the peak for the town. It's a celebration of the city and the arts and culture here that, if you see where it's at now, like you're saying 30 years ago, I've heard the rumor in some ways it wasn't a failure, but it could have easily in some way been like, we're good because of, weather. It wasn't a huge thing. It was similar to some of the smaller things that we're seeing now start up, right? It's sort of, you start small incrementally every year, it gets bigger and bigger.
Well, there were some downtown business folks, the Wicks family and Floyd Kraft are two that I know particularly basically bailed it out, loaned the money, and it took them a number of years, but they did pay back those loans. But that's why this festival survived. Otherwise, it would have gone under. And we talked about Ernie Krivda being the headliner on Saturday night. He did it with Paula Owen. He had a album out with vocalist Paula Owen, and he's the headliner because he was low cost. He was from Cleveland. He's a jazz saxophonist.
There's a budget to work with there.
And so we've been involved through that time. I started working on the program. I started at the newspaper when I was in 95, and I think I missed it because I came in the fall. But 96, I started doing the program and did it for many years. A few years back, I spent a couple years on the committee. That turned out to be sort of a conflict it was too much of conflict with the newspaper. But I was on the committee and did do the program with Aaron Holmberg and Amy Karlovic for the 25th anniversary. So that was a lot of fun. And then the committee decided they didn't really need to do their own program. So it was fun. So I've been deep into it. As we were talking offline, my wife was chair of visual arts for about 10 years, until about 5 years ago, I think. We figured she left. So that was it. And we even then we volunteered for many years. I know I have a picture somewhere of my son Philip at about age 10. He was into origami, and it is a picture of him at the origami booth showing some little girl how to do origami. So we just, we volunteer. We got the kids to volunteer. We've all been involved in some way. So, yeah, it's been great, and it is a community event. It's something I think a lot of people say. You go downtown, you see everybody. You just. It's great. You see some people you only see once a year. People you see often other times, but still you see them at the festival. So
yeah, I think for
wonderful.
me, how have you seen the music and the art? Because those are the two draws for it. It's really, that's the bread and butter of the festival in many ways. And sort of how those sort of over the years. Was there a time where one became more of a bigger focus? I'm a musician, so I usually, but I love visual arts too. But I usually have more memories of the music. That's what kind of got me there first.
Well, I think what makes this festival, and I can't say definitively, but I think what sets it apart and what's interesting about it is that it really is strong. It really is strong in so many areas. It has, sometimes you'll have a music festival and you'll have a small visual arts show with it.
Sure.
Or you'll have a visual arts festival and you'll have a stage with one or two regional artists. No, these are two co-equal festivals, which in a sense could almost survive on their own. Probably not thrive as much as they had, but could also survive. They also have, people come for the music and the art. They also come for the food.
Sure.
And Amy Kraft Ahrens has done a great job, with concessions. She's been in charge of concessions, I think, since she arrived here in town. So, and it's just been, and there are things people look forward to, their steak tips.
Yeah, I was going to go there. Those are certain staples that everyone remembers.
And it's too bad they no longer have. They used to have an alligator, fried alligator.
Probably too expensive to import that at this point, right?
Yeah, but people just decide. Vendors decide, and it's a real. There is a waiting line to get in. They've expanded it. It's like my Sunday breakfast on festival weekend is kettle corn.
No, for sure. No,
and then there's also, just to complete that thought, and then there's the youth area, which is amazing. As I said before, sometimes you have festivals, like arts festival, and they'll have a table with one, face painting and stuff. There's a lot of thought that goes into that, and every year they change up what they offer. They've expanded it to teenagers. So they now have the Beats on the Street, which features high school a cappella groups. They've done Chalk Walk, which has teams from various high schools. That's been going on for almost 6 or 7 years. I have a pile of programs in there. I could be shuffling them and looking, but it expands this, and trying to expand it so it involves all the community. Because I remember the teenagers' role was, some of the memories was you'd walk out of the beer garden where the music was, and they'd all be hanging out on the street enjoying a nice night on the town where their parents were otherwise occupied. But through the years, there was another effort to, I think Peanut Butter Rock. I'm going to close my eyes here. About 18 years ago was they. I do remember some of that. Yeah. Yeah, they had bands in the Claysell, and it was when the Claysell was sort of a community space, and they'd have bands, and the bands aimed at young people in the Claysell. I think that I did that. That did pretty well. So, but one of the things is, as with a volunteer organization, people move on, things change, people decide, not to focus on things. It's been interesting. It's just thinking about it in all the ways it's evolved, and what used to be here and what didn't. Do you remember the electronic stage?
I do, yeah. That was
Yeah,
the
it
whole
was
thing.
John.
Was it Grumpy Dave's? I think there
Yeah.
was a moment there. Maybe there's some of the Clozelle had some of that, but yeah, there
Yeah.
was the electronic. I think John Zibble.
Yeah, our colleague from BG Indy, John Zibble,
that was his little brainchild at some point. They kind of let him do some of the stranger stuff, which I thought was smart too. It was like it's just another avenue, another reason to show up, get more people involved who might shy away. It was kind of like bringing some of the weirder stuff.
Yeah, and then they had a hard, almost a punk rock stage for a while that Phil Dickinson organized, and that eventually moved into, I think it moved into Howard's, and then there again, it just, that sort of faded away. And in a way, that was a precursor to the after hours shows that they now have. Which
and Howard's just taking that on as sort of, they're more the main.
Yeah, and this year for fans, I will tell you, I have never been to an after hours show.
Sure. I've been there just because we traditionally, my band Trina Leaves play that slot before that.
Right.
Which is really fun, but you're also like, oh, I don't get to see the main stage band tonight because I'm sort of prepping. But there's a sort of tradition there of sort of, or if the weather turns bad, like I think Howard's then becomes sort of this, oh, wow, we had this really great local venue that can actually sustain larger acts, has a great sound system. So that's good too. I think one thing about Black Swamp is like, hey, if it rains, now we can move it inside. We can be adaptable to try to make this still happen too.
Yeah,
that's the sad part about it. There's a history of certainly being rained out and suspect weather, to say the least, during the festival.
It's been
good lately.
30,
Fingers
for
crossed.
30 years. Yeah, there was the year after the 25th was the year that they had really, really bad weather and moved acts into Howard's and canceled the art show on Sunday, which is sort of a controversial decision, but I think it was for the best. I was on the committee at that point, and that was that's one of the things that convinced me I didn't want to, because I'm trying to do the PR for the committee and send out stuff, notifications, and at the same time trying to do my BG Indie thing. But
that's a lot of hats to wear for sure.
Yeah, it is. But it's always, I just wrote a story on the need for volunteers. They still need volunteers. This is before. You always call up or get online.
Not everybody really understands that it's entirely volunteer run.
Right.
There's nobody sitting. They're not hiring anything out.
The
sound.
The sound people are hired.
Yep.
The sound people are hired. But yeah, it's totally volunteer run. And I can't imagine being at the festival and not working in some way as a volunteer or as writing. In the years when Linda was chair of visual arts, it was crazy. We're talking about not being after hour shows. Saturday morning, they were out there.
That's set up.
They were out there. She was up at 4:30 in the morning. After being up at they would line out the streets on, I think it was Labor Day morning, and they would be out there at 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the morning.
They're setting up in Friday right now, correct?
Now they're setting up on Friday.
Yeah, because there was always that tough transition between the twilight
this
of
is the
Friday night. So the third year now that them doing it getting set up Friday during the day, correct?
And the artist always asks for it.
I think it's a great move.
It was.
Some people work here in town because we're busy, and so hey, I can maybe only make it Friday night.
Yeah.
So or that's the only time I could maybe. So that gives you the opportunity to still do that.
Yeah. But there are stories to tell, like seeing our son Eric. We're out there marking spots 2 o'clock in the morning.
There's something very cool. I like that too, though. It's pretty fun. Yeah.
Yeah. He's heading home. He was actually heading home from work, but yeah. And I think they like it. I think it's gone really well.
Yeah.
It really does feel like the festival is really getting an extra start, because it was nice when it was just music, but having the artists out there. I think some of the artists like it because then they don't have to get to bed early to be.
No, they get to bypass that. Sort of
and they get
too,
to,
right?
and a lot of them love the music, especially especially the younger artists I've talked to. They love the music.
Well, the feedback's always been great. We were treated great when we played, but from the artists, visual artists as well, of how well they're taken care of by the volunteers here, and that there's certainly a unique experience about performing here and having your art displayed here. I think that's always been a tradition, and a lot of that has to be from the volunteer aspect of it too. No one's got huge egos here. Kind of get it going. So let's transition now more into the idea of talking about this year. I want to talk about the music because we've we've kind of set the ground for how we've gotten here. But I think this year's lineup is really, really good. I think Tim Concannon and Cole Christensen have really sort of curated something that's right up my alley, you know, and sort of covers all the things that I really like about music. And so, you know, my sweet spots usually are like funk, Afrobeat, jazz, you know, kumbaya. I think I think every one of those was checked off. And then also even the local acts this year, all three of those, or all four of those actually, I've either shared the stage with or have friendships with, which for me is fantastic. And these are all really good musicians. So I want to talk a little bit just about what acts are playing, get a little feedback from you. I listened to all the bands. I felt I needed to do that.
I've given all of them a listen to.
And I think that's partially, it's hard to always, you know, I can figure out a band from 2 songs or something like that. But I did want to try to just give my, you know, interpretation initially. And so for me, we'll start with the big one, because it's sort of Dirty Dozen Brass Band is coming back. And I think what I love about them is I actually saw them in Dayton years and years ago at a free community festival down there. So it's the same thing, right? Oh, this free festival. But they were fantastic, great energy. I'm not sure if you're familiar when they were here last.
I remember that. And
so they're just such a good band. I think they're headlining, what is that, Saturday night? So that's the real prime time spot, you know, for the festival. And so they've been at it for quite a long time, you know, veterans of the festival scene.
40 years. And they're just still rocking it. Their most recent work is a couple singles with Aaron Neville, and I downloaded and they haven't recorded a lot. You know, they keep going, but they're really true to that community spirit. They held on. I remember when when they came last time, it was right after Katrina. And I was talking to one of the older guys who I'm sure isn't with the band now, and just talking about, you know, the devastation in New Orleans, but how this, you know, this is, you know, this sort of, the music of New Orleans is really part of the community, and it was going to help them get through. So I'm looking forward to hearing. I heard them like once before at the university, probably in 93 or 94, but I'm not sure I can nail that down. But I remember hearing him going when we had soon after we moved here.
And they're definitely
played in Kobach.
They definitely have, you know, they've played quite a bit here in Ohio. It seems like they found a sweet spot here, you know, obviously being a New Orleans band.
Well,
this festival has a history of, you know, bringing people from New Orleans too, and that Louisiana sound. And the next band I want to talk about, though, this is what I'm really excited about, is Kalita and the Super Yamba Band. Now I have a sweet spot for Afrobeat. There was a band years ago here from Ann Arbor called Nomo. I'm not if you're familiar.
And you realize that there's the real Nomo was Dan Piccolo, who is the percussion professor.
Yeah, no. Every time I see him in town, like I give him a little head nod. I'm like, I really loved your band. Like you're kind of you're one of the reasons why I'm into Afrobeat. They played at Howard's, and so Bowling Green has always been this weird town that has this sort of Afrobeat awareness. There's a culture here at the university and stuff, and so this band is just fantastic. From the tracks I heard, it's certainly a throwback to a lot of that Fela Kuti traditional Afrobeat stuff, but it's got a modern sound. It's big, great brass section, just so much energy. I mean, that's
their front man, Kalita, played with Fela Kuti. He also played with spot me the name. The other.
Is it the drummer? I believe for me the other one was I can't remember his name. It's Tony something. I feel bad.
No, he's talking. I'll look it up.
Well, we can cut here. It's all right.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm trying to think who would be the drummer.
Oh, King Sunny Ade.
Okay. All right. So
okay. Yeah, he also played with King Sunny Ade, and it's like Fela and King Sunny. How do you know?
He's probably stole some ideas and was like, you know, just kind of rubbed off on a lot of that stuff too, right? It's so wonderful to see that, you know.
But he's also from Benin, not Nigeria. He grew up in Benin and moved to Nigeria when he was a teenager. But that's Benin has its own very distinct history and musical culture. And so it's a real mix. This band started initially in North Carolina, and they worked with a Senegalese percussionist there, but then they moved to New York, and they originally weren't an Afrobeat group, but they had some of that stuff and moved it in. And when they got to New York, there's such a scene there that they started playing clubs in Harlem, and they were recording, and they said, we need to, we need some vocals, because originally when they moved to New York, they were just an instrumental band, and they decided they were recording. So their idea would they bring in a number of vocalists, and they reached out to Kalita. This guy had seen him and said, "Hey, can you come and perform with us, for these 2 songs?" So they sent him the songs, and he said, and they were more Nigerian Afrobeat and that, and I like that. And then in talking, they said they were from Benin. He was from Benin, and I said, well, we have some of that too. Ended up, he was the vocalist on the thing. He did it 8 instead of 2. He did like 8 tracks, and then he said we should do some live performance. And they had a big gig in New York, and he came on and did it. And now it's really sort of he's really the front man of the band. They still do some instrumental stuff, but
well, I love the vocals. I think it helped. Yeah, I think one of the initial tracks had sort of just like a James Brown scream to get hot right off the track, and so I was really into that. As just sort of Afrobeat music has a tradition of sort of having heavy instrumentation, instrumentals, but that little front man can really help connect the audience to the music in some ways too, which is pretty awesome.
Yeah, the guy I was talking to is the drummer, Daniel Young, who has been with the band, one of the founders of the band from North Carolina. So, yeah, that was cool. I'm looking forward to that. And they also, they're sort of friends and work with Antibalas, who was here.
Doesn't surprise me,
a few years ago.
Antibalas, I'm a huge fan of them as well. And they were at the festival a few years ago, and I think, there's some overlap there for sure.
Yeah.
That Harlem, Brooklyn's, that New York scene, that stuff, there's a lot going on there with that sound and stuff, which is cool. Let's talk about Ruthie Foster again. This is another one, main stage. She was really, to me, kind of a throwback, soulful vocals, just kind of like, just feel good music. And I think that's for me, like there's a lot of blues and a lot of soul, touches of gospel and a lot of the music this year I've noticed too, which is sort of interesting.
With Ruthie, it's I always like to say that the festival is where people find their next favorite artist, and she, for me, she's almost the epitome of that. I saw her both times and was just blown away. So I have purchased her music, and it's on the regular playlist for me. And she's great. She's a great guitarist. I don't know what band she's bringing. I know when she was here before, she had an all-female trio that was just awesome with a drummer who just, the groove was just so crisp and driving. It was.
Well, there's been some tradition of like female fronted groups, especially guitar players, things like that. And so I think what's the other, Amosith Kaya is the other one that sort of falls into that a bit.
Right.
And she's a little more, like, to me, a little more raw, maybe more blues based. They say folk as well, but her stuff is a little more modern sound too with her, I think, which is really cool. The production's a little different, but it still falls into that same sort of vein of some of that, funk, blues, but gospel kind of stuff. But she was really interesting to me. It was probably the most interesting artist for me that I had never heard of before.
Yeah, I got a chance to talk with her, and she was just a fascinating story. And you're right, it's raw. She has a life story, backstory that's, and that comes out in the music, and she's very much into projecting that personal experience, those emotions in her songs.
Yeah, and I think, with that 8 o'clock slot, that's a perfect slot for her too, right before the Dirty Dozen brass band shows up. It's kind of a sweet spot for the festival, and I think she'll do really great.
Yeah.
I mean, I think some of the listens on some of her tracks are in the millions, and so she's definitely could be one of those artists that maybe going to be tough to get her back.
Yeah.
After this, there's a few artists, traditionally Black Swamp has been able to snag before they break to a larger, to that larger scene. I think she might be one of them, and really worth checking out. And so.
Yeah. Well, I think Trombone Shorty might be the ultimate case. They hit him.
That was a big one.
Just as, it was like hitting the wave. It was just like right at the peak, so they could afford him. And he put on him. I think that's probably one of my favorite shows. Trombone.
Let's talk a little about some of the more like kind of the country bluegrass stuff. That's the other area that we sort of dive into. Cole Chaney is really, for me, the kind of the only real kind of country artist that is on this time. Traditional kind of mandolin, banjo. It's still very rooted Americana stuff. Some of that bluegrass, but definitely country artist, traditional song storytelling kind of stuff, which I thought is good. That's still that's a part of the festival, and this, especially being in the Midwest, I think needs to be addressed. And so I really liked his stuff. Multiple tracks, really great. I'm assuming he's playing with a really solid backing band. And so and from what I read, he's from Kentucky, so he's Nashville adjacent, but still got a different sound there. So
it's sort of a raw, more sort of more of the outlaw country sound than the smoother pop country sound.
Very much so, yeah. It's not a commercialized country by any means. You know what I mean? It's more in that idea. And sort of to go along with that, we got to have our bluegrass, full on, full chord. You know what I mean? So just sort of playing what, if you break it down, it's almost like metal music. These they're just shredding the whole time. It's high energy, just lightning fast music, great harmonies. I'm not familiar if they played the festival before.
I don't think so.
But I was really into what I was hearing with them. I think there's a sweet spot for them. They're playing at 3:00 on Saturday. That's perfect for them. I think they'll do great. That's when the festival really starts to kind of bring in a lot of the people too. Is that 3:00 hour on Saturday? Yeah.
Then they're also playing at the on the family stage at 5 p.m., which is great. Let me see. And those family stages, the community stage, and the family stage, oftentimes, especially during the day, that's really where I want to hear the music. Because you really get up close, and the family stage is very comfortable, has chairs. The community stage is in the old Huntington Bank. That atrium is a wonderful spot, and people are just standing. There are a few seats. People are standing and crowding around. It's really catches the community spirit, and you can hear bands like Full Chord. They'll be at 5:00. I'm checking to see if they're playing on Sunday.
Yeah, I'll be impartial because we Trina Leaves is playing the community stage on Saturday, but the intimacy of that space is great because it's not a diss against the main stage, but there's a separation there. Right. They're above you, especially the type of music you're playing doesn't always translate the best to a large stage. It works, but I think it's nice to have an option for some of the artists to play something different. Helps them sell more, more merch too, which I'm sure they love, and just and plus it immerses them in more our culture to get downtown, to not just sort of show up on the big stage, do your thing, and leave. Some of the artists, that's just the nature of it. But I think some of those artists, like playing the after hours, doing the other stages is a cool tradition, and weaving them in with local and regional artists as well. That's been great. That's sort of where it's progressed from sort of the peanut butter and jelly and the punk and the electronic stage is really focused more now on the community stage, and the family stage.
Yeah, and it's it gives local musicians a chance to perform and shine. So
now the other band that I'm really into, of all this stuff, is this band called Yam Yam, and so they're an instrumental. They're really the only straight instrumental band that I believe that's on the festival. Super high energy funk, sort of in the vein of Wolfpack, if you're familiar with that band, which is mostly a bunch of jazz kids that seemingly just like disco music, which is usually what happens with most of these bands, which I'm going to throw it out there is probably what Yam Yam's sort of about, but excited for them too. That's a different aesthetic. I don't think they've really had a band like that at the festival, and that's definitely another aspect of the culture here, and a lot of musicians and different people are into. And so I'm excited for them. I think they're playing the late night at Howard's on Saturday night, and so that's a good slot for them to do that. There's also two other artists that I thought were really interesting. This is more in this kind of this gospel space. You have the Sensational Barnes Brothers and also Buffalo Nichols, and I think those were, for me, it's like we do have this sort of tradition of we're going to take them to church sort of idea. That's part of the festival. You know what I mean? There's been that sort of tradition. Sometimes it only happens on Sunday, but I think for this year we're going to get it on Friday and Saturday. Maybe on Sunday too. But was really into both of those. The Barnes Brothers, Sensational Barnes Brothers, great soulful stuff, kind of doo-woppy, that Motown kind of vibe, mixed in with some gospel stuff, which I thought was super fresh. Not really familiar with that at the festival too much. And then Buffalo Nichols is sort of this, it was hard to sort of define him. He was almost like this avant-garde kind of folk, blues, electro stuff. He was tough to even sort of pigeonhole him, which I thought was really cool, with some gospel stuff under there too, which was really interesting, sort of almost experimental gospel blues stuff, which is, really interesting to me. I'd love to see how that translates live. So, kind of what are your thoughts on some of that stuff?
Yeah, it's always, stylistically, it's always trying to find new things and, new performers, new sounds, and keep up with it. That's still going to appeal to, to the audience.
Mm-hmm.
And they had probably the most out band they've ever had was Plastic People of the Universe, which was a Czech avant-garde jazz band that was highly political, and they were out, and they were really
was Kelly Wick's booking when that happened? Probably. Okay, that makes more sense.
But
yes.
but the gospel thing, that's happens over a weekend, and that's threaded in. I don't think we have any Sacred Steel this year.
No. That's kind of
But what's interesting is Ruthie Foster on her newest album plays with Robert Randolph.
Okay, all right.
Sort of the superstar now of Sacred Steel, who also played the festival.
Yeah. No, I have a good anecdotal story of that one when Kelly Wicks had shared that he was very particular about the soundboard that he used, and so they had to ship in this soundboard. Yeah. The day before. It was very particular, and that's sort of. But again, it shows you how the nature of the festival, that they go out of their way to make sure these artists, no matter at the top and the bottom, to make it work. And that was sort of fun. But that Sacred Steel, definitely history there. Nikki D and that crew, have been doing that for years, and so I was glad to see this on the palette. Of all the different sounds and sort of the stuff that's going on too. I want to get into Latin stuff now because that's my other love of music. I recently went to Colombia. I love Latin music, cumbia. One of my favorite indie bands is called Chicano Batman. So I want to talk a little about making movies. I believe they've played the fest before too. I think they played on a Sunday.
They played last year. They closed the festival.
Was it last year's Sunday? Right. Yeah. And so I missed them, and I was a little sad that I did that because when I, in retrospect, went back to listen, was like, oh man, I would have loved this band. Yeah. And they're another fun one where if you jump through their discography, it's all over the place. You've almost got some traditional acoustic, Latin world stuff that's really cool, and then also it'll get really funky, heavy guitar-based stuff, electro, and so. Really into them. I love the name of the band. I'm definitely going to check them out. Did you get a chance to catch them last year? Or?
Oh yeah, I caught them. I actually did a story on them last year as the festival closer, and they were. It's interesting. They have an interest. It's a couple brothers who started it, and with a friend, and their dad was into music. As so many, you with these artists. How did you get into me? What'd you hear? Oh, my father. Sometimes the mother too, but really it's my father was had a stereo system and was playing this music. And I can usually tell, it's interesting, I can tell how old they are by what music their father played.
Sure. All right, so making movies, for what I love about them is that blending of sort of different influences. I mean, Latin music has been sort of, it's in pop music now. It's all over the place. I mean, it's sort of in all genres. It's what I even think about the other band that's sort of taken that idea as L'Opinion, of that idea of sort of bluegrass and sort of Latin feel and sort of folk music. There's overlap there too, so there's connective tissues between all this music. What I listened to them was fantastic as well. Again, very good musicianship. It's mostly it's in Spanish,
but
it's very political from what I hear, or a little more. It's it's in those roots as well, which has a history in folk music as well.
Yeah, it's from New Mexico, and they really are speaking to the issues, the border issues, and the cultures down there. All kinds of different dance. The album I picked up was all kinds of different dance styles, including. Mexican polka, which is, people think of polka as particularly Polish or German.
Sure.
Well, there's that whole polka tradition down there, which comes from those influences as well. Mm-hmm. But it's a great band. They're really tight. They're really tight. I spoke with someone there, and she talked about what they're about, that they're about really keeping this tradition, this community tradition alive, and yet giving it sort of a contemporary feel, not necessarily changing it a lot, but just giving it a contemporary energy. And a lot of these songs are, if they hadn't picked them up, if they hadn't reached out to people, older artists who had been singing them, or even older listeners who had heard these songs at community dances, they would have been lost. So it's a great thing. This really shows just the expanse of the term Americana. It goes all over the place.
Yeah, that term now is almost it's like a loaded term in the
Well,
sense of what it actually means. It's anything that comes from America, and so that's a lot. That's a lot, in some ways. And traditionally, you think it's just country folk stuff, but I think it's more of a world sound in some ways, more so than like a country
It
sound.
really is. It's the old, it's a place of immigrants, and they all have a sound. Or in the case of New Mexico, these folks aren't, think of them as immigrants, but this is traditionally indigenous and Latino territory, Latinx territory.
Well, I think modernizing stuff is great too. There's a few other artists that that I'm into. There's one's called Alton Goon, but they sort of took like traditional Eastern European folk songs and gave them like a disco funk sound, and they're fantastic. Kept the lyrics are the same, but the sound itself is modernized and brings it into light.
Yeah.
And so it is about preserving history, but also making it relevant again, which I think is really cool in music. I don't know if that's kind of a new thing, I think, to sort of dig back into history and try to give it a new take, or I'm just ignorant to that idea, but it does seem like kind of a newer idea of how do we preserve this culture, and maybe doing it through music is really cool. And so the Black Swamp Arts Festival has done a great job of that, I think, over the years, of having some very traditional, performers, bring their music to the swamp, from all over the world, which has been awesome to see, and not all of them had modernized. Some of it was very almost like regressive, moving away from that and getting more, just acoustic and using non-traditional instruments, which was really cool. So the last aspect of the main stage bands this year are the three, what I'm calling sort of the hometown bands. There's a history of the Black Swamp where you have sort of a collection of local performers, regional performers who get to share the stage with these incredible acts. And so the three that I want to talk about, the first one is the Antivillains. It's a project of Sarah Cohen, who's a Toledo native, who I've worked with and known for many years. And her band is, falls into sort of that Americana idea that we were talking about before, but more folk, like dreamy folk, great storytelling. And, they've been cutting their chops, out of Toledo for, probably going on 15 years now for sure, if not more. Sort of that's an extension of the Cohen family who owned the Happy Badger here in town years ago, if people remember them. And so kind of a reunion for them to come back through. And I'm excited too, because these are one of the two artists that we had brought to Grounds for our concert series that is going to be on the main stage this year, which I thought was great too. And so if you had a chance to see the Antivillains perform at all, or with Sarah Cohen.
I saw them at the Toledo Museum of Art. I think it was on it was New Year's Day.
Yeah, they have a tradition of doing that, actually.
Yeah,
it's
they do.
They do.
Yeah, and I remember seeing them there in the Great Gallery.
That's cool. I mean, I think it's great for them. They don't play a lot, and so even their performance at Grounds, at the end of last year, there was a great crowd for that, because it's unique to see them perform, and I think they'll have a great time on Saturday performing. I think they're playing at 2:00, I believe, or is it? Yeah, I think it's 2:00.
Yeah.
And then the other band I'm really excited to talk about
1:30.
1:30 for the Antivillains there. All right. Strictly Fine is another band that's playing on Sunday. And so I love these guys. We've played with them many times over the years, and we brought them to Grounds as well. But they're just sort of I try to describe it. It's like if Frank Sinatra and Funkadelic tried to make a record, and these guys somehow tried to figure it out. And so really fun, very comedic, actually. Really the only band that's probably going to be, you're going to laugh while dance and while just and love the instrument, the vocals, the band's super tight. I think you had a chance to talk with them a little bit too, right?
Yeah, I did.
In the past. And so
when they came to Grounds, we did.
And they're out of Detroit, sort of that little Detroit adjacent. But yeah, really excited for them on Sunday. I think they're going to bring a lot of energy to that sort of that Sunday side of the festival.
Yeah, they're up there at 12:30, so you can get your lunch, have your lunch.
Yeah, that's gonna be a hot start to that Sunday, and so hopefully you don't stay out too late on Saturday, so you don't miss those guys on Sunday. Yeah. But there's also another great band on Sunday as well. There's it's going by the Alex and Ness Organ Trio. I don't know Alex's work. I looked into some of his guitar playing and some of his records. Great jazz guitarist. Definitely has cut his chops in a lot of traditional jazz. The cool sound. But the two cats he's playing with, Travis Alkerman, the drummer, who I played with before, fantastic jazz drummer, and then Galen Bundy, who's sort of this enigma who's been around town for years. They actually have a project, the two of them, called Bunker Man, which is actually going to be playing at Grounds in November. But this little trio they've got, I'm really excited about. So it's pretty much a guitar, organ, drum trio. That's sort of a tradition in jazz. Is sort of you'll have way more knowledge of this, but this organ trio thing is this term that gets thrown around recently. I don't really understand it. It goes back. I guess it just means we got a guy with an organ, or what is it?
An organ trio is typically Hammond B3.
Sure.
Organ with a guitar and drums. No bass, then the organ player plays with his feet.
So he's covering the bass with his feet. Yeah. That's sort of,
and this goes back, man. This goes back to, as soon as the Hammonds came out, and it goes back to Harlem. Those big Harlem clubs. I think Jimmy Smith is the biggest name out of that, but there's a whole lot of it, and it's a different sound. It's a real soulful, bluesy sound. There's a great guy out of Cleveland, Tony Monaco, who played the festival 10 years ago or something.
Okay.
But it's a sound. It's like the piano trio, it's piano, bass, drums. Mm-hmm. This is an organ trio.
That's fun. I mean, these are younger guys too. I mean, not super young. They're probably in their young 30s, but they're still.
It's young to me.
But they're still an appreciate. Yes, it's pretty young for me sometimes too. But there's appreciation for that aspect, and that's really, to me, the only truly true jazz element of the festival that we've got. I mean, there's going to be elements of improvisation and stuff, but these guys are really going to be. That's if you're a jazz person, that's going to be the trio to check out on Sunday. Super early, 11 o'clock. That's a sweet spot for that. Yeah. It kind of gets things moving throughout the last day of the festival, and so. So I'm excited for that. I mean, I think this is a great lineup this year. I think there's something for everybody. A lot for me personally, which I'm excited about. But yeah, I mean, there's going to be stuff. Going to miss some things, I'm sure, but I'm going to try to do my best to kind of catch as much as I can.
Hey, that's the story. It's like trying to do all the art, trying to do music on all the stages. I catch a couple numbers, 2 or 3 numbers as I'm passing by at the community stage or out at the family stage, and I really don't hear much on the main stage during the day. It's
that's more the nighttime spot. The Tristan does happen because it's so active out there. You're immersed in the street and just taking in the food and the sometimes the main stage really does come alive when the sun starts to go down a little bit, for sure, and that's always been sort of a tradition. But a lot of great bands. So you can hear them. The sound system is always booming. And people don't really fight each other at the sound. That's always one thing you wonder as me as a musician, different stages, are we fighting each other? Yeah. They do a good job of seemingly kind of offsetting that to where no one's really fighting each other for sound, which I think you'd hate to see that in a festival setting, where trying to play over each other or something weird like that. So let's talk a little bit now about the visual arts this year, kind of what to expect. You mentioned, we were talking earlier about this, that they're adding some different categories this year, and I think that's interesting as well.
They've changed up. They haven't added. I don't believe I haven't added the amounts up, but I don't think they might have increased the awards. They very generous awards. Here, $2,000 is for best of show, and then they have $1,500 for best 2D, two-dimensional work, and $1,500 for best 3D. But they've also added a judges award, which is a selection based on creativity and jury interest and not necessarily technical expertise.
Okay.
That's $1,000. Sustainability award for an artist that uses eco-friendly processes and material. And that's a $500. An emerging artist award, $500, is for an early career artist with promise, and then 3 honorable mentions of $350 each. The judges award, sustainability award, and emerging artist award sort of take the place of they had like third place, second place awards. So those they're sort of it's interesting. They're directing them more. I think it's interesting. Give something to a young artist because you always want to bring in young artists. That field is the field of people who do art shows. Is really like so many others, really an aging profession. A lot of people my age from the late 60s and 70s when this really took off. They're aging out. And I think the festival's done a good job of attracting young artists. And there again, it's a connection with the music is that some artists come in and they say, hey, they tell their friends. Yeah. And there's a real connection of artists out of Wisconsin, out of the Midwest who picked up and they said, this is a good show. They like the fact that it's a college town, that they have college students, and college students do, they will buy stuff. The artists are told that they need to bring things in a wide variety of ranges. We don't get too many. We've had in the past. There's some people who come and troll just for the prizes. They're not really interested that much in selling at the show. There's a guy who painted portraits from Boston. He got shut out, and I don't think he was there one year. But it's an interesting crew, and it's sort of like it was fun, especially as I said, Linda was chair of arts for about a decade, and she made a point of going through the festival and talking. Her ambition was to talk to every artist. I'm not sure she ever quite made it over the course of the weekend, but because some of them really could talk, sure. And just to get their feedback, and I think that fed into the festival. So it's the artist there again. We have arranged. We had a best of show who was an African artist. Sorry, I think he was Nigerian, maybe Ghanaian.
Yeah, the wonderful artist. I remember that stuff from last year. And there's that one guy from Wisconsin with that surreal stuff that sort of seems to win all the time too, and love his work. I think last year he brought in some puppets. If you saw in his where he was doing stuff with kids while he was talking. I mean, he's become sort of a personal favorite of mine. He seems to come back
and he has
every
the
year.
big the lineup.
He's got the big, large, colorful ones.
Ringlesetter. Nick Ringlesetter.
I think so. I believe so. Yeah.
Yeah, and he is one of the artists who has brought other artists in
from Wisconsin, right? Yeah. So
he's told other artists you got to come to this show, and it's good. So there is that a whole young crew. There is
that's important. I think my critique of the art, if there was any over the years, is where there was a 5-year span where it felt like it was almost too focused on a certain type of art.
Yeah.
It really was. There wasn't as much diversity in the type of art. And I think over the last, probably 10, 15 years, there's just so much different stuff there now, which I love. Different forms of art, different age groups, a lot of woodworking now, which is fantastic.
And we talked, as we were talking about before we started, when Linda joined us, they did, what did we decide? 12 years ago?
Yeah.
Or something. They started using the Zapplication, which is an application that allows artists, a single application that allows artists to download their images and their application materials. And then it's online, which means the judges can just at their leisure look at it, and then they still get together, but often they know there's a group of, there's a group that they all agree should be in the show. Mm-hmm. There's a group they agree shouldn't be in the show, and then they deal with the others and trying to balance out the art, because there's there are a lot of jewelers. Jewelry is the biggest art form. There are a lot of ceramics, and they try to the job of putting it together, all the details of, you don't want two jewelers next to each other. You want to spread them out, and a lot of photographers, but it's always surprising how little glass there is. There are a few.
For being in the area, for sure, yeah. But Yeah, I mean,
It's hard. But then again, you remember the stories of big winds coming through and hearing crashing art, and that's like,
there could be a reason. Yeah. It doesn't
yes,
travel
but
as well. That's
yeah, but it's fun. There's, and that's the juried show, and that was one of the big, when talking about the history, that was one of the big changes, and it was probably about 5 years in. I'm thinking 6 years in, where it used to be they had a juried show on one end. I think it was on the south end, and north end was just whoever applied, and it was just really artsy craftsy. And then they had that for a few years, and they got rid of that. Did all of Main Street became a juried show, but to make sure that there was a room for area artists, they did the Wood County Invitational Show. And that's a great thing. And then across the street, you have the college artists, the university artists who come down. And it's always funny when we're doing what was called the Dawn Patrol, which was setting up at 5 o'clock on Saturday morning. And especially when Linda was involved, I would be down there sometimes, just being her gopher of she needed somebody someplace. Somebody needs help setting up. Go. So I sort of got to wander around and experience it. All these artists would be coming early, trying to set up, and then, about 15 minutes before show starts, the students show up and they get their stuff done. But it's great. Yeah. It's the artists. It is great variety, and if you're looking for Christmas gifts, it's good time.
It's funny there. What do you think about the university's role? Because I want to wrap up with this. 'Cause I think this is kind of the last thing that I think is important to talk about, is that the university, traditionally was not doing a great job of letting the students know about the Black Swamp Arts Festival.
Right.
I can attest to this because I went there and didn't show up to the Black Swamp Festival maybe until my senior year, or I was a 5-year student, and so maybe it might have even been my 5th year. No, usually it's that first couple weeks once the semester starts. A lot of students go back home. I don't know why or something.
Yeah,
you kind of do that, but I don't remember seeing any advertisements for it, or just like, hey, kids, you need to go downtown this weekend and see this incredible 3-day festival.
Yeah, I think BG News did stuff, but you're right.
It wasn't much in the sense of like, wow, there really is something pretty incredible going on here down the street.
And it's I think they're now, because students are an important part of the volunteer pool.
Huge part of it. Yeah.
The
high school is
over
huge. High school
800.
does so much of that for sure, but the university as well. Yeah.
Yeah, it takes over 800 volunteers, and the university has had a role in that. The arts education kids are involved in the youth art area.
Yeah.
I don't know how many years, but one of the big things is tear down on that.
Yeah.
On Sunday. The rugby team's been doing that for years.
Yeah.
Roger Mazzarella and his guys they come down.
That's great,
big
actually.
guys,
Like
and so it's been involved getting the students out. I'm hoping with the rally BG on Main, which
sure.
that
helps awareness just because of they're relatively close to each other. You're talking about a 2-3 week span.
Yeah, and they see the posters and such.
Yeah,
so
I think
it's for a couple years they did have a table at Campus Fest, but that's it's finding somebody who can devote that time to setting it up and such. But it's there is a connection. There always has been. Faculty jazz for many years.
That's a big one. I think so. The arts and the music programs for sure.
Right.
I've found ways to bridge that. I think to me because I was a VCT student. There wasn't a lot of overlap or awareness through culturally, and I think even if the football games, why is there should be a big act like the hey guys, the Black Swamp Arts Festival is this weekend. I don't. Maybe they mention it, but I sometimes feel like they don't. It's just sort of. But I think with the new president, he's a musician himself. I think that was his past.
He's a singer, yeah.
So he's got some awareness of trying to connect those dots a bit too. But part of me goes, do you really want the Black Swamp Art Festival to get too much bigger either? I don't know. Maybe it's sort of it's kind of a sweet spot now where it doesn't really need to get bigger or expand out at this point. I don't know.
Yeah. And one of the fears at the beginning, now it's, as we talked about, it's such a huge community event. There were a lot of people in positions of the the relative power of local politics, really were not crazy about this.
Well,
They were
was it
afraid.
kind of like, oh, they're going to bring all the crazies in, or there's going to be drugs in the streets,
It's
kind of that
gonna
whole
be,
thing again?
Well,
you know?
no,
Yeah.
it was going to become a big beer,
Like
you
that one
know,
festival
beer
from the 70s, right?
beer fest, and that's one of
Yeah.
the things they said. No, we're going to only sell high end or higher end beer.
Yeah.
And
That
we're
prices
gonna,
out the younger, some
and
of the young
it
people
was
just being silly about it.
the beer could only be consumed on private property. It was a
Yeah.
major move
Sure.
when they expanded that onto city property, because before the beer garden was there
was
because Floyd Kraft owned that
Okay.
property.
Okay, so he was able
That's
to
why
fill
it was here, and for many years it was like the stage was here. You couldn't have beer here.
Yeah.
You know, you had to get your food and bring it into a beer garden that's no bigger than sort of what, you know, that area is now.
Yeah.
You know, where they have the beer serving tents. That's the place you could have beer. And no, and that the city is now allowed it to go up is great. And you know, the festival has shown so much potential for what the city can have. It's you know, some of the things like Firefly Nights. I think they certainly grew out of the spirit of the Black Swamp Arts Festival. Some of the women who started that had, you know, connections to the festival, but it was also, you know, I think Dora, there was a controversy about the fact that Dora is suspended during the festival. And people were complaining, and it's like, you know what? You don't have Dora without the fact that the festival showed what a vibrant place downtown could be.
Correct.
And, yeah.
That's interesting. Yeah. That's the other part of it. Yeah. Sort of that's where a lot of funding that we found out comes from the festival too, is the beer garden does help sort of offset a lot of costs that come with doing a festival like that. So,
sure.
So being aware of that, of trying to take advantage of that, but also not let it get out of control, you know, for whatever reason. And there doesn't seem to be any incidences that I can think of where the festival's had anything too dramatic or anything out of the ordinary that I can think of, you know, from
not to be negative, but there was a point, maybe it was when Robert Randolph played, when that seating area was just so packed. And you know, all of a sudden you're thinking it's, you know, one spilled beer on somebody's girlfriend. Could this turn into a brawl? But you know, man, people are so mellow.
Well, that's what gets me to the idea of, like, you know, again, like, is there a certain level of artists you want to get? Because if we push too high, you don't want too many people. You're going to have some people just showing up who are going to be forced their way in, and this is a free thing, and they're going to, no matter what, I'm getting to see this guy for free, you know, and it might get a little rowdy. So that's like, it's kind of where I'm getting, where there's sort of a sweet spot with the festival where, like, we don't want to get too much of a draw, but at the same time, but also I love the festival is kind of a place for unknowns to expose people. That's the point too. You don't want to just give them a bunch of radio bands, bop, 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 bop. I mean, that's kind of what happened with the old festival in town, where they gave up those, you know, before you were here, that festival, whatever happened in the 70s.
The Poe Ditch Festival.
Yeah, the Poe Ditch. But that's what they did. They just brought in a bunch of big name bands. So all these people came from out of town and didn't really care about the city, and just sort of, you're just there because, you know, Badfinger's playing or whatever it was, you know, and sort of the festival never catered to that. It always felt more like we're promoting the arts and music, and we're partially trying to expose people to stuff too, which I think that creates a different culture than just booking from the sheer idea of how many people can we get to show up.
Yeah,
because you're not selling tickets. You're not selling tickets, right? You're not. You know, you're not really. That's not what you're thinking about. Like, we'll sell 100,000 tickets if we book this artist.
Yeah, it's the festival is, you know, the beverage sales, you know, the funding of the festival is, you know, beverage sales, and then the food from the concessionaires. The artists all pay. They pay to apply, and they pay for their booth fees, and that's a major revenue source. And then people who donate, you know, people who donate, and corporate sponsorship. And one of the things the festival has maintained from the beginning, they don't sell naming rights. Yeah, it's always going to be the Black Swamp Arts Festival, and not even Black Swamp Arts Festival
brought to you by,
even though you know, they've had corporate sponsors who have ponied up a good amount of money. It's that's, you know, that's the big, you know, the line they won't draw, that it's, and that maintains it as this belongs to the community.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, that I'm gonna kind of end with that one, because I think this is such a community festival. You know, it gets voted every year. In some ways, it's like one of the best free festivals in the country and certainly the state.
Yeah.
Because of what it is, how it's run. It's not commercialized. You know, my dad, about I think 3 or 4 years ago, came to the Black Swamp Arts Festival. You know, I've lived in this town for years, but just he lives down south now. And he was just like, wow, this was fantastic. This was really good. I'm like kind of surprised. And he's been a lot of places. Like, and he comes back every year now. He's like, I want to be here every year for these 2-3 days. Obviously to see, you know, my son and my grandkid or whatever. But also because it's a really great festival and it sort of feels great. You know, it doesn't, you're seeing stuff you've never seen before. And it is a huge community celebration. There's not really anything like it, you know, around here. I mean, there's plenty of music festivals, different community events, but I think the Black Swamp Arts Festival is definitely unique. There's a reason why it's been successful for 30 years, and it seems like it's probably could go another 30 pretty easily.
I don't know what.
You know?
There's
not one person who's holding it like grips. Like, hey, if they give up, the whole thing falls apart. You know,
they've gone through their shifting leadership, so it's that's
a big part of it. You know,
and you know, I'm not sure there's anybody on the committee now who was on the committee at the beginning.
Okay,
but.
That's actually a positive in some ways.
Right.
That's not a negative to say that the people want to pick up the torch and keep it going.
You know,
you might be wrong. But
I might be wrong, but on that, but
nobody in a major sense of like, or whatever it would be. Yeah. As a whole, it has sort of the new generations have taken it over. It's probably. I wouldn't be surprised if some of it's lineage. You know, my parents.
Well, certainly.
I'm going to step in and kind of do some similar things.
Certainly, the Kraft family has played a huge role. Yeah. You know, Floyd was very involved, and now he's. You know, he's stepped back, but Amy has been involved for years and years doing concessions and the beer garden. And that's, you know, as I said, that's an essential part of the funding that comes in.
And I think Tim Concannon and Cole Christensen stepping in for Kelly was a big thing as well, because that was probably a big transition to make sure the quality of the music kept up, you know, and sort of, because a lot of music booking is based on connections and knowledge and working with different, you know, talent agencies and stuff too. And so it's like, you want to make sure that keeps to grow too. And again, this year, hats off to the crew. I think it's been, I really love the lineup, and I think it's something that can just keep getting better in some ways too.
Yeah.
So
yeah, it's great. It's always such a sort of a shock to walk down on Monday after the festival, walk downtown, and all of a sudden it's back to normal.
No, it's weird actually. No, we all kind of like, there's that collective town hangover, you know, that sort of happens from just exhaustion and just the whole experience, you know, and that week after is always a little slow, but there's something nice about it too. And you go, oh, all right, take a breath, and wow, I can't believe that was all here, because it's here so fast and it's just gone. You know what I mean? The parking lots are just back to parking lots, you know, it's sort of, but yeah, thanks for talking to me, Dave. This was really cool. I think, you know, a lot of us in town obviously have known about the festival, but I think, you know, the more we can learn about it, makes us appreciate it more. And I really want to make sure people knew about all the different artists that are going to be there this year musically, and always, you know, going to be a lot of stuff to look at and touch, and from the artistic side too. So
great.
All right. Thank you so much.